そこの鬼さん、そこの毛、そこの毛、赤い川では水遊び。川が流れた先にも鬼さん、どこまで続くや、この鬼遊び。
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today I want to talk about Tekken and Soul Calibur, whether or not they share the same universe. Now, if you were to just ask a random person in the FGC, they would probably say yes. 76% people believe that Tekken and Soul Calibur share a universe. Now, if you look at a timeline for which these two games takes place, it definitely lines up and there's definitely space for it. I have an excerpt here that I want to read. It says, for Bandai Namco, their staple fighting game series, Tekken, the modern civil war with the Mishima bloodline, and Soul Calibur, the ancient war between two mystical swords. Now, the Tekken series takes place, well, it starts off in the 90s. There is a few things that happens before, but really Tekken 1, 1994 to Tekken 7, 2015. We don't know if Tekken 8 will start off, will take off from 2015 as well, or if they'll do a big time skip to catch up to the year 2022, 2023. We don't know. But looking at Soul Calibur now. According to the timeline released by Bandai Namco on their Soul Archive site, Soul Calibur takes place around 1586. This is about 400 years that separates Tekken and Soul Calibur. One thing that we do know for a fact is that there is some crossover between characters and the lore. The first thing that I want to talk about, the nursery rhyme that you guys heard at the beginning of the video. This is from the Tekken 7 storyline. After Kazuya is outed as a devil, he's fighting on the rooftop with Akuma. Heihachi is secretly recording it, broadcasting it to the whole world. He's outed as a devil. After that, journalists, news outlets, governments from all over the world, they're trying to understand what it is they just saw. And one of the journalists who was getting the inside scoop on everything, he was invited to Kyoto, Japan. This is where all of the Devil Gene carriers once lived. He was invited there by an associate to the family, associate to the carriers. He showed up there and he met this old man, and the old man was kind of giving him the runaround. He was kind of saying, well, yeah, they used to be here, but they're not here anymore. This is their stuff, basically, just showing them their fortress, right? And I always wondered, right, you have the Devil Gene carriers who, even though they harness the Devil Gene, they still are kind of like protectors of it. They're like, they do good in a sense, kind of like Jin. Jin is a Devil Gene carrier, but he's not necessarily evil. He does evil, but it's always because he's trying to do right. And the Devil Gene carriers are the same. And I wondered, why have we never seen them before, besides Kazumi? Jin and Kazuya misuse their power. They abuse the power. And you wonder why no one has ever showed up to stop them. And the answer is, they pulled a Bruce, they pulled a Baek-Dusan, and they disappeared. The Haijo clan, the Devil Gene carriers, Kazumi's ancestors, vanished without a trace. Will we get answers to it? I don't know. But talking about the origin of it, I think it could in a way tie back to Soul Calibur. We'll get to that in a second. It's really deep, so I do want to start off on a lighter note. One thing about Tekken and Soul Calibur that they both for a fact share is Yoshimitsu. Yoshimitsu is in both games. Actually, there's two Yoshimitsus in Soul Calibur and there's one Yoshimitsu in Tekken. Now, like I said, there's about a 400-year gap in between the two games, and you would have to imagine there's possibly 6, 7, even more Yoshimitsus that's unnamed, their stories is lost in time. But the first Yoshimitsu, he is the one who sort of built up the Maji clan. The second one is the one who really sort of solidified it. Because what's interesting about Yoshimitsu and the Maji clan has survived so much. Back 400 years ago, there was these two swords that was like corrupted and possessed, and the Maji clan survived all of it. Now, in the modern era, you have a civil war between the Mishima clan, and once again, the Maji clan is surviving it. I just think that's interesting there, how you have Yoshimitsu being a part of both games, yet coming out alive. Now, Tekken 7, the story isn't over yet. Soul Calibur the same, but Tekken 7, the story isn't over yet. The Maji clan definitely could take a hit like no other, because it happened in the past. In the past, in Soul Calibur, the Maji clan was pretty much destroyed. It was wiped completely out. The second Yoshimitsu is the one who sort of resurrected, brought it back to life. But I think it's very interesting how Yoshimitsu, the name, the clan, the Maji spirit has survived for so long, as well as the sword. The sword has maintained throughout. It's not destroyed. That is an achievement of its own. Now, talking about another instance where Tekken and Soul Calibur, their stories could intertwine. I really want to know what you guys think about my theory here, but I'm going to say it. In Tekken 7, we got the introduction of Eliza, a 1,000-year-old vampire. Now, like I said, Soul Calibur, the story took place 400 years ago. So that would mean that not only would she have been alive then, but she would have been alive way before it. When I looked at Soul Calibur's story, because I just wanted to see if vampires existed. Is there any mention of vampires in the Soul Calibur story? But not only is there a ton of information about vampires, there's 5 characters who are vampires in Soul Calibur universe. Some of them has always been, some of them was bitten and turned into a vampire. It's very interesting there that they would add a vampire to Tekken, and the vampire is 1,000 years old, just like the vampires from Soul Calibur. Now, when you're talking about vampires, right, 5 vampires plus Eliza, that's 6. The vampires are immortal. So that creates the question, where are the other 5, right? If they are immortal and they cannot be killed, where are they? But I think it's interesting that Eliza possibly can be active during that story. If we were to get a Soul Calibur 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, she could easily show up and be on the roster and in the story and active. And I wonder, how would the Tekken community feel about that? If she wasn't in Tekken 8, yet she showed up in Soul Calibur. Same fighting style, same 2D shenanigans, but now in a different environment, a different era. I think that would be really cool, and it really would tie together the universe, the 2 series that much more. But talking about another piece of evidence, one thing that could wipe all of this Eliza stuff away, like a tide knocking down a sandcastle. In Eliza's story, it specifically says, with the intentions of taking a nap, she climbed into a coffin, but inadvertently slept for 600 years. Even when she is awake, she is unable to control her sleep patterns and will suddenly fall asleep at any time. Now, 600 years before 2015, that is exactly the year 1414. This is roughly 100 years before Soul Calibur takes place, before the sword becomes corrupted. We'll talk about the sword in a second, but this is another big hurdle here. you have her sleeping for pretty much the whole entire Soul Calibur storyline. So does that wipe away the possibilities of this character showing up? I would say right now, yes. But if they wanted to, they could definitely change this, because they done this for Leroy Smith. Leroy Smith, when the character was first created, the Big Apple War was a very important part of his story. I talked about it in a video. You guys can find it in the Tekken Lore Explained playlist. But when the character first was created, the Big Apple War took place when Jinpachi was in control of the Mishima Zaibatsu. But the devs, like a few months later, they came back and they retconned it. They shaved off like 6 or 7 years, and now the Big Apple War takes place around the time when Heihachi was in control. And I believe they done that to fit him into the Tekken 3 storyline. It could be the same for her. They can shave off 200 years, turn that 6 into a 4, as in boom, there she is walking around Soul Calibur interacting with the cast. This is just my own wish for the character. I think it would be really cool to see her interacting and moving around both timelines. She's in a very special role, being alive for 1,000 years and being one of the only characters who's able to survive in both. Talking about another character who's been alive in both. Not Yoshimitsu, not Eliza, but Heihachi. Heihachi was introduced as a guest character, and the way they did it is very, very fascinating to me. I'll read you guys the paragraph. After completing his mountain training with his pet bear Kuma, Heihachi stopped at a hot spring resort to recuperate. There he encountered an ancient metallic fragment. According to an old picture scroll, the shard was a piece of Soul Edge, a notorious sword from medieval Europe. Grabbing the fragment in excitement, he accidentally cut his fingertip, and after a moment of dizziness passed, Heihachi looked around his surroundings. A feeling of unease washed over him. He was no longer at the resort he had been at just a few moments ago. He was stunned, but nevertheless remained collected. After he wandered for a while, he concluded that he was no longer in the modern day Japan. He had somehow traveled back in time to the later 16th century. Though he wanted to return to his own time, part of him was trembling with anticipation of what was about to transpire. He knew the history behind the fragment, which was ripe with battle between warriors fighting for its possession. Now he was right in the midst of it all. Eventually decided that fighting and obtaining Soul Edge was the perfect challenge to test his strength, and proceeded to seek it out. Now there's a big argument in the Soul Calibur community and kind of the Tekken community whether or not this is canon. Whether or not at one point in time Heihachi cut his finger on a mystical rock, a cursed rock, and that transported him 400 years into the past. Time travel is not some unfamiliar topic when you're talking about Tekken. And I believe it was Tekken 5, Xiao Yu's whole story revolved around her trying to time travel to stop Heihachi. Everyone know, Heihachi threw Kazuya off a cliff, and that led to all of the crazy things of the past. Eventually led to him dying, coming back, Kazuya dying, coming back, Heihachi dying. You know, that moment was the biggest moment in Tekken. And Xiao Yu, she was working with this scientist, I can't remember his name right now, but they had a plan of putting together a time machine. Now, even though in her ending they did, that's not canon, but just the fact that they were trying to, the fact that this person exists who could create a time machine if he had the right resources, that tells us that time travel is possible. And if a character wanted to go back 400 years, would they find Soul Calibur and Soul Edge? That is the question. The final thing that I want to talk about, this is another big controversy, I'll say. In Tekken, we have the Devil Gene. We do not know its origin, but we do know there is this red voice. It's often referred to as the devil who controls it, who manifests it. Jin thought it was Azazel, but there's rumors and there's hints of it being something greater. When you're talking about Soul Calibur, the swords were corrupted. They were turned into this evil demonic weapon. How did that become? One could argue that the same person who is manipulating the devil gene was also manipulating the swords and what it did to the users, because the swords and the devil gene kind of works the same. Even though the devil gene is more biological and the swords is, a sword, once the person picks up the sword, it does the exact same thing as the devil gene. It corrupts the mind, it makes you see things, it makes you angry, it motivates you to do evil. It tries to push you over the edge. Exactly the same way as the devil gene. The only difference is one's a sword and the devil gene is kind of like biological, but they work exactly the same. And what I think really would be make or break for whether or not the swords was created by the same person who created the devil gene is what happened to the Hydro clan. How were they created? It really is kind of like unsettling in a way. That song that the old man was singing is currently the only thing we have left of them. I hope we get more answers as to what happened there, because the devil gene carriers, it really is like they had the answers. They knew so much more than Jin and Kazuya. That's the thing, right? Jin and Kazuya are very powerful. We see what feats they're able to do. Escape death. They're able to tank lasers. They can survive helicopter crashes. They are pretty much indestructible. But at the same time, they know very little about the power itself. So imagine what someone who really understands the devil gene would be capable of. Would they be capable of making Soul Calibur, the sword, Soul Edge, the sword? Switching topics, I have a post here I want to read from 4 years ago. Besides Yoshimitsu, what other Tekken characters may have an ancestor in Soul Calibur? Josie and Talman are the most obvious bets. What if the devil gene is just a Soul Edge fragment embedded in the Mishima's genetic code, and Soul Calibur embedded in the Kazuya family genetics code? And that's the reason why they are attracted to each other and why Jin is so powerful, since he has both of their blood. That could also be the reason why he shapeshifts into Devil Jin and he gets the tattoos similar to Agul. Now, for those of you who don't know who Agul is the first person who was able to wield the sword without being corrupted by it. Usually when people go to pick up the sword, their mind turns to dust. They're rotted from the inside out. And he was the only person that did not happen to. He was the only one who was able to control it. But at a certain point, his son grew envious of him, grew jealous, and the son wielded the sword against him. Agul eventually defeated both the sword and his son, and he tried to destroy the sword after that, but it didn't work. So he took the fragments that broke off and he created a sword that equals it, a sword that matches it in strength and powers, but also counters it, kind of like a good and bad. And that is why there's two swords, and that is why they're saying that maybe these two swords somehow manifest itself into becoming the devil gene. It's a far-fetched theory. What I think it's more likely is that whoever corrupted the sword, whatever entity corrupted it, is the same person who created the devil gene. For me, that's much more likely than the sword itself being the key. But also when you talk about Heihachi finding a fragment of it in some hot spring. You have to imagine there's probably fragments of the sword all over Europe, all over Japan, right? Another thing too that is really interesting about Soul Calibur and Tekken. There is a character in Soul Calibur. The character's name is Za Salam. Now this character is kind of immortal, but what they do is they reincarnate over and over and over again. Some people believe that this person eventually reincarnated to become Raven. Now, of course, you can see the similarities there, the biggest factor being that they're both black. But in my opinion, I don't think this is how reincarnation works. Reincarnation isn't solely based on race, right? To my understanding, you can be reincarnated into a fish for all we know. So this character can very much be alive and reincarnated, but who knows? He's probably a fish or a bug, or he could be some random person who don't remember who they are. I don't know. I just think it's a lot of information here. I wish the developers would do something with it because, for them to just put Yoshimitsu in the story, and then that's it. For them to have Heihachi time travel, and then that's it. And then I feel like there could be so much more to it. Really with Eliza, her story can really be the thing that ties it all together. They don't really have to go the route of, saying the swords and the devil gene is one of the same. I think it kind of is, considering what it does to the host, what it does to the user. But if they didn't want to go that route, I understand it, because the devil gene is very important to Tekken. The swords is very important to Soul Calibur. But I do think having them both exist together and their stories kind of being a before and after for one another, I think would be really cool. Going back to the excerpt that I read at the beginning. For Bandai Namco, their staple fighting game series Tekken, the modern civil war with the Mishima bloodline, and Soul Calibur, the ancient war between two mystical swords. Are they one and the same? Would that take away from the Mishima's story? Would that take away from Soul Calibur's story? I don't know. Would it add to it? I don't know. But I just wanted to do this video because I do want to say for sure that both of these are existing in the same universe. Whether or not all these other details overlap and connect, that's up for debate. I think they should add a little bit more to it just to make it more exciting, but they don't have to if they really don't want to. Both of these franchises are really good on its own. You don't really need to merge them if you want. I know this would definitely increase the popularity of Soul Calibur. Tekken right now is at its peak. This is the most popular it's ever been. And if they did want to lift Soul Calibur as well, which they're trying to do by adding skins of Tekken into Soul Calibur, you can tell they're trying to lift that game up. If they really wanted to do that, putting Eliza in it, changing her story a little bit, turning that 6 to a 4 would definitely get a lot of people excited for it. But that's just my thoughts. That's just my ideas. All of the evidence and the details that I found. If there's some that I forgot or left out, let me know. But that's it. That's everything that I have to say and talk about. Let me know what you guys think about my theory and just what the things that I found, right? But that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.